with the support of TV Cogeco.
Welcome to this edition of Hashtag The Issue. I'm Mark Carr, and tonight we're going to be talking about one of the largest projects in the town of Milton, and that's the Velodrome. Pluses, minuses, I know you've got a lot of comments to make, so get on and tweet me at Hashtag The Issue. We want to get you involved in this conversation. When we were discussing the topic, we decided that the best way to proceed with the Velodrome issue was to get Jennifer Reynolds, who's the Director of Community Services, to come in and talk, to give us some background. So before we get to the panel discussion, let's roll the tape with Jennifer Reynolds, the Director of Community Services from the Town of Milton, and she'll tell us all about the issue. Okay, roll the tape, Chris. Hello, I'm Mark Carr, and today we're fortunate to have the Director of Community Services with us, Jennifer Reynolds. Jennifer, thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, this is your opportunity to tell everybody out there exactly what the Velodrome is all about. I know there's been a lot of discussion back and forth, a lot of misconceptions out there. So we'll start off with you just laying out the project for everybody and where it stands.
Okay, so let me go back in time a little bit. The organizing committee for Toronto 2015, who are...
And that's for the Pan Am?
It's for the Para-Pan Am Games.
Yep.
So in about 2 years ago, actually the fall of 2011, they had identified the need for a velodrome for track cycling events as part of the Pan Am Game bid package. Some of the earlier discussions with another community had not been fruitful.
Hamilton.
That's correct.
And they just bandied it back and forth until they couldn't wait any longer.
Well, it turned out that they needed a host community, so they reached out to municipalities within about a 60-kilometer radius of the Athletes Village, which is down in Toronto on the Portlands, and Milton was one. So they came to see whether or not Milton would be interested in a velodrome. So a velodrome, for the purposes of the games, is a track cycling venue. It's a 250-meter wood track. But what Milton Council ended up directing staff to do was to do a business plan, to take a look at what a velodrome could mean to Milton and whether or not there was support to go forward. So we did a business plan. It was tabled in January of 2012. And the business plan really has been our guiding document since that time, since we agreed to take on the velodrome. And it's based on two business principles. One is that this facility will serve as a high-performance cycling center for the Pan Am Games, but just as importantly, and certainly more importantly going forward in legacy mode, so post-games, it will be a community recreation facility. So those two business principles have been driving all of the work that we've done. We've subsequently entered into agreements with Toronto 2015, and we've been formulating the operating plans for the velodrome to operate under those two business principles. So,
okay, can I just stop you there and pose a question to you? What kind of background to prepare the business plan did you look at moving forward after the post games to see whether the track itself in the velodrome will be utilized to an extent that would be beneficial to Milton?
Right. So the business plan was a lot of research was conducted. There aren't comparable facilities in Canada, so I think you probably know that, or even in North America to the same international standard. So most of the research was done worldwide, and a lot of facilities were assessed on the best utilization for the velodrome. So when we say it will serve as a community recreation center, if you can picture a track like a NASCAR track, so it's 42-degree sloped, banked, 250-meter wood track. But within that, and because of the nature of the track, there's a depressed area, 1.2 meters, in the inside.
Like an inner circle.
It's called the infield, actually, and the infield has the capacity to hold 3 basketball courts, 4 volleyball courts, or 9 badminton courts, depending on how it's lined. It's a sprung hardwood floor, and in our design...
Oh, that's much easier on the knees.
Knees, that's right. Yeah.
and at my age, that's what I look for. Yeah.
So the other thing we found out was that there needed to be not just use of the track. So I want to really clarify that this facility has concurrent use potential. So while cyclists can be on the cycling track, people can be recreating on the infield. So there's netting that will come down from the roof of the facility and completely separate those sports facilities on the infield. So the cyclists can be training, whether they're high-performance Canadian cyclists or whether it's you. Coming and having a lesson on how to ride a track bike and how to use the velodrome, or parents and kids taking it up for the first time. That can all be happening at the same time activities are taking place. That's right.
That the inner field is being utilized by various groups.
That's right. It's also, there's a 1,500 permanent seats, so 750 on each side. So that infield could also serve not just for sporting events, but trade shows or conventions or faith-based gathering or convocation kinds of activities. The school board was interested in a place where they can bring a whole lot of students together and gather in one place. So it's a very large place. So the flexibility on the infield, which was also supported through the research, could be for any number of other kinds of things that could be going on concurrently with the track cycling.
It's interesting that you should mention a trade show or conference, because there is no facility right now in Milton, is there?
Not for a facility of that size. Yeah. So we've got also designed in opportunities for large flatbeds that might have to back up and deliver large equipment. A concert on the infield, you could have staging, you could have equipment brought in for putting on bands or battle of the bands. So those kinds of uses can happen on the infield, and that's just within the track itself. The other features that have been built in, and again predicated on our research through the business plan, there's a fitness and conditioning center. It's about 3,000 square feet. It'll have facilities both for the high-performance athletes, so cardiovascular kinds of facilities, bikes and treadmills and that sort of thing, but also free weights. It's also able to be completely used by the Milton public, so they'll have access to a fitness center. There's a studio, separate studio room, multi-purpose kind of uses, could have classes of fitness or yoga or spin, Pilates, those kinds of things could take place in the studio. There's a walking track, so now at the top of the banked cycling track.
There's a track around the track.
That's right, and it's a 3-lane, 300 meter with a rubberized surface, so if you've been in our sports center, it's very, very, very well used by everyone, all ages, running, walking, strollers, little kids training for sports teams, so that's a feature. The lower level has a multi-purpose room available for rent. There's a food and beverage concession operation, retail bike shop, a couple of offices will be leasing out. So all of those things combined are both to allow it to operate in legacy mode as a high-performance cycling center, and Canadian Cycling will have their full track cycling high-performance coaching group in the Velodrome. They're moving. Currently they train in California. So they'll be in there with an ongoing presence. The Ontario Cycling Association are leasing an office, so they'll be in the facility with their technical staff and coaching staff. So really an opportunity for this facility to, for Milton, be a place where all ages of people can go to recreate, participate in physical activity, see and observe high-performance sport in training, in competitive mode through events, get interested in cycling, but use it as a community recreation center. And that's critical, actually, Mark, to the ongoing financial viability of the facility. It's what the design has been predicated on. It's one of the reasons that this facility is a legacy facility for Sport Canada, the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario, to really see it continue to flourish in the longer term. So we're well under construction. The steel's up. You know where it's nestled. I mean, that's the other wonderful thing.
And that was what I was going to ask before we get to the big question about dollars. Where it's located. Right. Is that a draw? Are you finding businesses wanting to participate in that area?
So it's on the west side of Tremaine Road at the intersection of Louis Saint Laurent. Right now, you'll see it's out in the field, but by design, it's within the Milton Education Village. So we've done secondary planning work really to define that whole area of Milton with a potential Laurier University campus and a really an innovation center, mixed housing, parks, schools. It'll be a hub of activity and a thriving community with the fullness of time. So the Velodrome is the only facility out there. It's tucked right at the toe of the escarpment. It's being designed with wonderful views of the escarpment, and because Milton is such a current hub of cycling activity, road cycling in and around all of the escarpment roads, cycling at the conservation areas, BMX cycling, mountain biking, those are all currently very popular. So,
and they'll all be incorporated into in and around the facility?
Well, if you can picture road cyclists, you know, it is Canada, and so very, very easily they can turn to track cycling for their winter training. BMX cyclists, there's a lot of crossover between the various cycling disciplines. So the facility has the potential to really spur interest in all types of cycling, and it's a wonderful growth curve for cycling in this country. So the location and the current popularity, if you just drive on any of our rural roads on any given Sunday, you know, you're going to see packs and packs of cyclists. So there's not, when the games are on, it still will be the only facility there, but clearly the synergies and the opportunity to develop the richness of Milton with a post-secondary educational institution, Laurier and or college in partnership, the Innovation Center, we see it as a real catalyst. It has the potential to encourage sport tourism, business type development, certainly hospitality development. So we certainly look forward to that.
So will there be hotels in the area of the education?
Well, I think the actual the facilities that will be developed will come as part of the overall development of the education village, and so that's still a little bit out. The kinds of facilities, I think, you know, it will really.
You've got to encourage some hotels, at least get some hotels
because
in there.
It will be the home of Canadian track cycling. It will be a facility that will host on an ongoing basis the Canadian Championships and events that will invite other nations to come to Canada, to Ontario, to Milton, to Halton. And so the opportunity to capitalize on all of that with people coming in. The Pan Am Games are the largest multi-sport games, second largest multi-sport games, larger than the Vancouver Olympics. You know, over 50 sports, 41 countries. They'll bring, you know, a couple 100,000 people to the area. The facilities for the games are in 13 different municipalities, so we're just one of several. I'm sure you're aware of that. Yeah. So really, I think there's a great opportunity for the business community, the hospitality community, tourism destination community in Milton to take advantage of this facility, and going forward, I think it will enrich the fabric of Milton.
Okay, now when you're out talking to the general public, there's maybe the people don't really understand the full impact of this, and I have heard that from people that they're concerned about the dollars that are being spent. Can you elaborate on the dollars and the partnerships with the Pan Am Parapan Games?
I can. So the original project budget to build the Velodrome was based on what was called an indicative scheme. So that's a little bit jargon for the base facility that was in the previous jurisdiction, so the City of Hamilton. During the design development part of our work, and in order to identify those components we needed for the business plan, so the additional facilities, appropriate change facilities, and storage for bikes and all that kind of thing, the project budget at $56 million required a contribution from the local host community. Our council had gone on record very early on in the process as capping Milton's share at $17.6 million. So of the $56 million, our share has always remained capped. The gap associated with that project budget has been funded by Sport Canada. So Milton's share of $17.6 million includes $3.6 million from the Town of Milton. Those monies were identified to be part of a larger budget to build our next major community center. We're building another community center essentially at Main and Tremaine, and that center had a number of components envisioned, including ice rinks and a pool and gymnasiums. So the allocation for the gymnasiums was identified at $3.6 million.
And so that's been allocated over to the Velodrome.
That's right. So instead of building...
So it's not new money that's
new.
flowing in.
Right.
It was already planned to be used in that way.
That's right. And now that community center, by the way, is going to design next year, and then construction. It will still be built. We wouldn't consider new gymnasiums because we're going to get extra gymnasiums at the Velodrome. So that was the actual Town of Milton share. It was reallocated from one budget to the Velodrome. The $14 million has come through private sector donations, naming rights for the facility, the Mattamy National Cycling Center, and a fundraising.
Not the Gord Krantz? Okay. Let's keep going.
And the fundraising campaign, which is still underway. We're about 90% of our goal of $14 million, and it's largely led by passionate cycling enthusiasts that see it as a real game changer and see it as an investment in the future of cycling, but I think more importantly the future of our youth, in not just in Milton and Halton in Ontario and Canada, as a motivator to encourage people. And I want to maybe dispel a myth that track cycling is for elite people only. It will appeal to children. They will want to take it up. We're having lessons, introductory lessons, rental bikes. Kids will want to try track cycling. And we see it as just another another option in your suite of things for people to do to encourage, active, healthy living, participation in something you can do lifelong. So the share has stayed at 17.6. The provincial and federal governments are funding the balance, and the project at this time is on schedule.
But as you know, the Pan Am Games have come under some great criticism lately for overspending. And are they going to be reined back, and will that affect the Velodrome and your participation in it?
Well, certainly, I know the media, and I'm sure you're referencing some of the more recent stories, but our intelligence on this is the capital projects, ours being one of several new builds. They're rebuilding, of course, the football stadium for soccer in Hamilton. They're building a new aquatic center in U of T Scarborough. Our brand new facility, a new athletics stadium at York University. All of those are on time and on budget. The overall Games Organizing Committee have continued to maintain that as the case. Certainly, our own information on our project, we monitor very, very carefully. So Milton's commitment Milton Council have been very, very steady on their firmness to our contribution to the actual facility itself.
So out of the 15 that's the community of Milton, that 3.6.
Correct.
is just being reallocated from another project, which is who's going to go ahead.
Sorry, Mark, just the other thing, because maybe another point of clarification, it's also $3.6 million that come from development charges to allow the town to respond to growth-related infrastructure requirements. So,
however, development charges don't help with the maintenance of it in the long run. That has to come out.
I'll come to that, but I just want to be clear that we wouldn't have been able to have used the $3.6 million on roads or on the hospital or on other infrastructure.
And that's because it's
the legislation
directly
for recreation.
For recreation facilities. Right. When you get a development charge, it's segmented and it has to go to those areas by law.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out of that those monies that the town is contributing, is the region kicking in some? Because it's going to be a regional draw. I'm sure that the Velodrome is much more than the town of Milton. It'll be talking about North America-wide and Canada-wide.
So not directly to that construction budget, Mark, but clearly the region have been supportive. They're currently in the middle of widening Tremaine Road and assisting us with all of the servicing connections and all of that kind of thing. So they've been supportive of the project, and I know that from a policing and transportation planning point of view, they've been with us in lockstep.
Because that is going to need, as you say, additional policing and additional services and so on. That I know a development charge comes down and it's for recreation, but it's for the capital costs.
Right.
And the maintenance of that facility afterwards, after you've utilized the development charge, that will fall back on the ratepayer.
Well, let's talk about that. So we've established, and the business plan set out at a high level, what the operating costs would look like. So we did projections at that time. We've continued to refine them, and in fact, we've just submitted to Council our projected 2014 operating budget, because we'll actually take over the facility in August for, we'll have 4 months of operation next year. So there is a budget that's projected to both on both the expenditure and the revenue side. On the expenditure side, it's the kinds of things you'd anticipate with operating a major facility like that, and utilities and all of the program kinds of costs. On the revenue side, we've projected our expected user fees, rental payments, the leases that I mentioned, third-party operator leases, those kinds of things have all been projected into the revenue side of the budget. And the other thing that we've done is a very comprehensive assessment of the life cycle costs. So in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years.
And what are those costs going to be to replace the worn out parts of the Velodrome?
And we have a council policy where we will redirect monies annually from our operating budget to a reserve to be used for those life cycle replacement costs. So those have all been contemplated, built into the budget. The fact that it's a legacy facility from the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario ensures that the town is part of a legacy fund. So recently Milton Council considered the fund, and there's a confirmation for the Town of Milton for the Velodrome of about $736,000 per year for the first 3 years of the Velodrome. The life of the fund is 20 years. They've committed to the first 3 because they need to see the building get open, they want to see the games hosted, and then a year sort of on a town operation. There's 3 legacy facilities, and each year, each of them will submit their business plan to receive their allocation for the next year. So the legacy funding is also built into our revenue stream. Again, it's intended to last over the 20 years of the life of the fund, with the commitments coming from the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario. So there will be a net impact on the Milton taxpayer, Mark, but again, back to those principles, it's intended to be the same as our other community recreation centers. So there's a expectation that the community centers we currently have in Milton are funded from a combination of user fees and charges, drop-in fees, hours of ice for skating, swimming lessons, all of those things. And there's a contribution from the tax base. And it's expected the Velodrome would be
no different
than that's right.
Jennifer, if you had one thing to say to those naysayers that don't want the Velodrome in 30 seconds, what would you say to them?
Right. I just really want to clarify the multi-use nature, that this is a real opportunity for Milton, for the people of Milton, that it will be both a high performance and a community recreation facility, and that I think there's a great opportunity. I think it will really be a wonderful legacy opportunity. And people go back to Montreal. That was a long time ago. A lot has changed in sport systemic planning, in the need to be more multi-purpose with such a facility, and all of those things have been considered. So appreciate the continued keeping us on our toes, but I'll tell you, Milton Council has done the same, and I think both on the build and on the operations, people will look forward to getting in there, and you getting on the bike.
And I'll get on the bike, see what we've got for TV Cogeco to tape some of those those events. Jennifer, I appreciate you coming in and talking to us about it and clarifying maybe some of the misconceptions about the Velodrome. Best of luck with it. And on a 9-2 vote, most of the times on council, you're never going to get those two swung over. So, but I do appreciate you coming in and laying it out. And now let's go back to the regular show.
Thanks, Mark.
TV Cogeco, truly local television.
What's your vision for Canada? We dream of a country where each new generation can explore rugged shorelines, wide open prairies, and vast forests, a place where wildlife can thrive. This is the vision that drives the Nature Conservancy of Canada. We identify the land, we secure it, and we protect it forever. It's that simple and that effective, but we can't do it alone. To find out how you can help, visit natureconservancy.ca.
You wouldn't be stupid enough to risk it all on a losing hand. So why risk it all out on the water? Don't gamble with your life and the law. Keep the beer on the pier.
TV Cogeco is truly local television, and now becoming a member at TVCogeco.com makes posting your public service announcement quick and easy. TV Cogeco, total access is just a click away.
You're watching TV Cogeco, truly local television.
Welcome back to Hashtag The Issue. I'm Mark Carr, and we want to thank Jennifer Reynolds for that lowdown on the Velodrome, and she's the Director of Community Services for the Town of Milton, so a very knowledgeable individual. And I've got 3 individuals here tonight with us live, so you can get involved in the conversation. Hashtag the issue. Tweet me now. We've got 3 individuals that have definite opinions about the Velodrome. I'm going to introduce them. Jamie Krane, who you may know as the host of Success Stories right here on TV Cogeco. Nice to have you with us, Jamie.
Thanks for having me.
Brian Jones from Memory Lane Limousines, the owner, right?
Right.
And you've got some stances, I know, I've heard. And back with us again, Rob Duvall from RDC, right?
Yep, you got it.
RDC Networks. And Rob, appreciate your being here again with us tonight. I'm going to go to Jamie and ask him, because I think that you aren't really sold on the Velodrome. So why don't you give me your opinion about the Velodrome and the cost to Milton and what Milton's going to get out of it?
I have to tell you, Mark, I'm a fence sitter. I like to listen a lot to understand what's going on, and Jennifer, certainly that clip was very informative. She knows what she's talking about, and I know when the town needs somebody who's very diplomatic to stand up in front of everybody and try to sell people on a concept, Jennifer's the one that they go to, and she does it very well. But I've got some concerns at the same time. I mean, you know, I did a little bit of background work first, and there was a velodrome built for the 1976 in Montreal, right, in which they recently turned into a zoo, which is really kind of a joke. And certainly we need to make sure that processes are in place that prevent that from happening. I know that, you know, maybe Montreal didn't keep it up, and maybe people weren't practicing there as much as they should have. And the Canadian Cycling Association moved down to the States, and they were practicing down there instead of up here in Canada because we didn't have a facility. So on that hand, it'd be very nice to get something up here that the organizations that are designed for that can use. But at the same time, I'm not 100% convinced that we're not going to get stuck with the
What
bill.
is it that you don't like about the Velo? Is it the money invested federally, provincially, locally?
Well, I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm saying I'm sitting on the fence because there's pros and cons on both sides. Certainly, and I think from council's perspective, bringing an icon like the Velodrome and putting it where they did, they're hoping that that's going to be able to sway the universities to come in and make a stake in the education village that they want to put there. And I know that they've got no commitments from anybody yet. So they're really sort of banking on the fact that if we park this big velodrome right in the middle of where it's going to be, then, you know, build it and everybody else will come. I'm hoping that that's going to be the case. And I have to tell you that from the angle of, you know, what's going to happen here in town, what do we want to see happen? Certainly the education village is a big part of the town growing. Yeah. And not just that, but for businesses that are around here too. I mean, everything just booms when, you know, all these college kids come screaming in, which is wonderful. And if the Velodrome helps make that a reality, then I'm all for it. But as a taxpayer here in Milton, I want to make sure that I'm not going to get stuck, you know, trying to support this thing once the legacy fund dries up. That was one. And there was another thing that was in the paper just recently, and I think Rick Malboof brought it up, and he was pretty upset about it. Of course, he's upset about
a lot of things, yeah.
No offense, Rick, if you're watching. But he brings a couple of really good points, is that we don't have anybody on the committee that's going to make a decision on how that legacy money is spent. And I think, number one, I think we should have. I think that, and it's just my opinion, but in looking at how things have transpired, we've had a lot of stuff rammed down our throats that maybe we didn't have the time to digest properly and go through the process and say, hey, look, what is the long-term impact going to be? Now, whether that was just a coincidence or whether it was something that was contrived by the committee to try to push things along. I mean, I understand they're under all kinds of deadlines.
Yeah, but a lot of that is crystal balling. There's no real sense of what it's going to do. You have to have that little leap of faith, as long as it's a small one. Brian, what do you think about it?
I'm very positive on the whole thing.
Okay.
You know, what Milton has done over the years, since we've, you know, since I think the first water came up in 1999, and see our town grow from there. I know personally, the town has grown a mile and a half closer to my home than it was, you know, than it was when I bought it. So, and it can't grow any further. It goes right to Tremaine Road. So, what we've seen so far with the expansion of Milton over the last 10 years and people coming in, it's got fantastic potential. I love the idea of it that it's an open concept. which means that we can have concerts in there, we can have great meetings in there if they're big town hall meetings or big, huge discussions. There's
basketball,
yeah.
volleyball. So it's going to be a community, from what I understand from Jennifer. Rob, I know you're a big promoter of it. You like the idea, don't you?
I like the fact that the design that they chose, I'm basically saying what you just said.
Okay, you're off the show.
Yeah, exactly. The design that they chose, actually being an open concept, is at least a better business decision, because
sure.
if you're going to keep that facility full, if you're going to keep that facility generating revenue of any type, then it has to be used for other purposes. It can't be just for cycling. Although that's great, what everyone has to understand, it is not cycling the way we think of cycling, not getting on a 10-speed. It is a fixed gear racing bike. And these are people who train for this profession in this sport. So we have to make sure that there's other facility capability there. And I think they have done this. The good thing about the council in Milton that I've seen is quite a large number of them. This is not their first rodeo. So they have seen these things come and go and mistakes made in the past, and they were pretty careful about the design. Just sitting in on some of those council meetings, they did have a lot of debate on what type of design they were going to go with, and quite a few were thrown out there. There were some with pillars, in the center. Of course, it's cheaper to have the center of the facility held up by standards. It is more expensive to have the open concept, non-fixed roof in that facility. These are all expenses. I think what we have to understand, which took me aback a little bit, is they've already allocated based on the amount of people that are living in the area. And as you said, Milton keeps growing really close to your doorstep, whereas you used to be out there on your own. Like I've always lived in town. Right, I've always lived in town, so it's not such an issue for me because I see the same amount of people in my community that I've always seen, unless they start going upwards. But in my particular case, or in your particular case, they've already allocated a certain amount of money for facilities. They were talking about Maine and Tremaine. Well, because they're moving more into that area, they're already going to spend millions of dollars. So the question was, do we spend, I'm just taking round numbers here, but do we spend $10 million on a facility 1/10 the size, or do we throw our $10 million in, but because you have the Pan Am Games coming, we get a $50 million facility for our 10. And basically what they had done on the math is they put in their amount, their portion, and got a $50 million facility. Now, not to say that there haven't been mega mistakes. Anytime you deal with, expos and you deal with, Olympic facilities, and the list goes on, there is disaster after disaster after disaster. And like Jamie, he's a businessman himself, you look at that and you go, I'm not so sure, if this is a great idea.
Well, it makes you skitterish.
It does. It makes you very
nervous. When you hear about all these things.
We hear about a $5 million operating budget. How are we going to make sure that we get that kind of revenue out of there? I mean, okay, I know that they're helping to offset. I think they said, but it was $735,000 is coming back to us in the first 3 years, annually for the first 3 years, to help with operating expenses. That's a far cry from $5 million. How many long track or fixed gear cyclists are going to be in there, and what kind of revenue is that going to generate? Okay, I understand we have other functions in there and other facility or other uses for that facility, and I think that's going to be the key. Is how can we generate enough revenue so that it doesn't cost me, the taxpayer.
Right, and the type of person that's in there as well, because if you get, government rarely does anything well. They're good at governing, they're not really great at making money. And I think that is something I'm sure we can all agree on. They don't make money very well.
They know how to spend money well.
They know how to spend it, yes. And not to say that they don't do a great job at getting these type of venues, large projects that simply private enterprise quite often doesn't see a need for, and maybe some of these things need to be kicked off. But really, as Jamie brought up, you really have to make sure that the revenue is coming in so that the taxpayers of the town are protected.
Okay, now we've got a tweet from a viewer. If you can put that up on the screen, we'll have a look at it. And I think they're talking about the Legacy Fund. So how much will Milton receive annual from the Games Legacy Fund? I guess that's something that everybody is concerned about. And thanks for that tweet. And remind our other viewers that they can just put hashtag the issue. put your comments down, and Darren will pull them off and put them on the screen for us. So the legacy issue. Brian, how do you feel about the ongoing aspect of the Velodrome? And we're saying Velodrome, but it's much more than just a riding track, as Jamie indicated. But how about those long-term costs? Where is that money going to come from?
Well, I think that if we can build something like a community center, all right, and have it multiple uses like we were talking about, and as I mentioned before, concerts and other things, there is space there for rental if businesses want to move their head offices there. So if we can have a bit of room for that, and that's what's going to keep it in legacy for the next 15 or 20 years or 25 years. It's the businesses in town, if they can support it on their own, if they can find a way to hold something there once in a while.
And do you think Milton is going to grow big enough to be able to support a venture of this size?
Absolutely. In the next 18 years, we're going to be 300,000 people in this town. And so a lot of people. And a lot of new people that are, when you come to this town, you try to help support the town, just like when I moved here. People always drove to tell me, support the town, support the local businesses. And if we've always done that in this town. It's what's make this Milton such a great town, is that businesses thrive here because local people normally support their local businesses. And if we can continue to do that and support our local venues, and this is could be a great venue for us. It could be really good venue, more than our expectations could hold, yeah.
Jamie, are you that optimistic, or are you still sitting on that proverbial fence?
Well, I did a little bit of research before we came in, and I found some numbers that were comforting and a little bit disturbing at the same time. And not the numbers weren't disturbing, but the verbiage is disturbing. In the first 3 years, and this will actually answer the question, there's 3 facilities that the Legacy Fund is supporting. It's the Aquatic Center and Fieldhouse. It's going to receive approximately $4.1 million a year over the next 3 years. The Velodrome is going to be $736,000 a year for 3 years, and the athletic stadium, which I think is at York University, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is $288,000. So that's 3 years. That's wonderful. But what's going to happen after that? Now, the Legacy Fund is $70 million. If it's properly managed, the interest on that money should be enough to support these operations for quite some time. But that's still not
because really it's the ongoing costs, isn't it, that everybody is concerned about.
Well, sir, Jennifer mentioned that, okay, we took some funding that we had allocated to something at Maine and Tremaine, which is a long way, by the way, from Tremaine and Louis Saint Laurent. But that's going to be in the middle of an education village. It's going to be in the middle of a university campus, for lack of a better term. How many people from the town are going to take their kids to the gym in there? They may or may not. I mean,
but is it going to be a draw for that particular area of the town?
I'm not convinced.
And you're going to have to change the name. You're going to have to move to a city. If you're going to get 300,000 people up here, you're going to have to become a city, not a town. Anyway, sorry, John.
No, that's okay. And so Ian Troop is the game's CEO, and I know that these guys are pros. I mean, they this is what they do. But at the same time, they have a deadline. They have certain goals that they need to meet by certain times. And can they push things through and maybe not allow the councillors to do their due diligence? Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what happened in this particular case. I'd have to echo Rick Malboof thinks. But on the other hand, we take somebody like Colin Best, and I have a ton of respect for Colin. He's a very knowledgeable guy, and he voted in favor of this all the way along. So I'd like to think that out of all of them, I mean, certainly Rick is a very studious guy. I give Colin a lot of credit, and if he's voting for it, then I almost have, well, again, we have no choice now. We're committed, right? But you have to sort of go into this with some blind faith and saying, okay, I hope that the people I voted for are looking out for my best interests. And even though Rick and Greg Nelson was the other one who voted against it, they're not convinced.
But they've consistently voted against it. It's been a 9-2 vote consistently. You can almost predetermine that. Are you as comfortable that with that leap of faith that your councillors have looked at this in more depth?
I'm a little more comfortable because of the business design. I'm not. I'm never convinced that that we should just jump in blindly without having kind of the due diligence. They've done a great job. They had to shove a lot of stuff through in a very short period of time. With the time that they had, I think they made the best decision that they could. But I do caution that these things have many, many times failed. And I think this is either Milton's chance to shine and make sure it's done correctly with a lot of hard work, or it will be a spectacular failure. One or the other is going to happen. I don't think there's really much room for in between.
Boy, that fence is getting crowded. You're sitting right on it there.
I think it'll work.
We've got another tweets from one of our viewers. Should the Velodrome not succeed, as seen in Winnipeg and Montreal, would Milton taxpayers be at risk of footing the bill? Brian? I think they would.
Yeah, they might be, but it's just got to succeed. We've got to make good use of it to make it succeed. And Winnipeg, maybe, Milton is one of the fastest growing cities in Canada right now. Yeah. We can't say that about Winnipeg. We certainly can't say that about Montreal. We know all the mistakes that were done in the 1976 Montreal Olympics. And just about everywhere they had that Olympics in that city. None of those facilities are being used at all today. Yeah. And it's the same thing happened at Expo in '67 in Montreal. Nothing against Montreal, it's a beautiful city. But something happened, not enough planning. Not sure why it didn't work in Montreal.
And major cost overruns too.
Yeah, we just simply have to make it work here.
No, maybe the situation was in those scenarios they had multiple facilities that they had to look out for. We've got one, we've got this Velodrome, and we need to make sure that the people we vote for are going to make it work.
You're still sitting on that. We got two on the fence and one that's tipped over in favor of it. But the dollars are, they are very large dollars. And is that going to be managed properly? And I'm going to turn to the host of Success Stories to answer that.
Well, I think that it would be a whole lot easier for us to answer that if we had somebody on the committee that makes those decisions, and right now we don't. And I think that's number one. I think our councillors or the people that are in charge of this here, even Jennifer, need to lobby harder, lobby more on our behalf, so that we can have a little bit more say in what happens. Because if Milton just gets forgot about, because who knows, maybe the other ones have more overruns or their operating budgets tend to be a little bit higher than they anticipated, we could get left out in the dust. And there's only so many Madamies around to come in and step in and bail us out. And there's only so many naming rights I guess he can sell off. Which actually brings up another issue, and maybe Rob can speak to this a little bit, but I read that it was going to be the Cisco Velodrome, and now I've read that it's going to be the Mattamy Cycling Center. What's the deal with that?
The names keep jumping up and down. What basically it comes down to is the major sponsorships. Mattamy has put in a tremendous amount of push and money, and Cisco is doing all the design for the wireless end of it for the entire Velodrome. And they are a huge sponsor. So the great news is that's a really high-tech company. We deal with Cisco directly for a lot of our enterprise installations, and that's the Cadillac of high-tech. So the advantage is it's Cisco Canada.
Free Wi-Fi.
Yeah, free Wi-Fi in there, and plus the fact that every single TV show you watch, they have those phones that make those special sounds. So it's kind of like watching 24. That's the type of systems that they're putting in. So it's a very high-tech facility. It's going to be spacious. It's going to probably work. If I was going to bet, if I'm going to make a prediction, my prediction would be it's going to work for only one reason, and the big reason is we are doubling the amount of people that are going to live in Milton over the next 20 years. And
that's a short period of time to double.
It is, yeah. and just based on numbers alone, I think it will succeed, because having Colin on the show last time, he also brought up that we also have the highest amount of younger people moving into the area. And those are the people who are going to use facilities like that.
You bet.
So we're not really dealing with a seniors area. We have fantastic facilities where we're generally dealing with a younger demographic, and the younger demographic are going to want to use it. So if I'm going to predict anything, that would be my prediction. I think only because of that. When you look at a lot of other areas like Winnipeg, those areas, they have these fluctuations in their the amount of people that live in those areas, and they go up and they go down because they're cities.
But really, it's the maintenance cost, that ongoing maintenance cost, that really is going to either tank this facility or allow it to operate at not a profit, but on an equal footing. Brian, what do you think that there's going to be enough to take up that and pay for all of those maintenance costs?
I think there is. You know, one big thing we didn't really discuss is it's supposed to be a learning center, all right? And if there's 2 universities that are coming in, and if the universities can go under contract to use a certain percentage of the Velodrome, then that's going to help us with our costs in it throughout the years. And if they can lock in for a 20-year period, both universities, if we're actually getting to, university kids are starved for high tech. And if this is going to be a high tech facility like we say, then I think it's a perfect place for them to learn, whether it's basketball, whether it's high tech industry, whatever it is, sports. And I think that's what we got to emphasize on. So the key here is getting those 2 universities, and if they're going to come, then to make sure that they definitely have to lock in.
Share the cost.
You bet.
What's business doing to make sure that that happens then? So we're not stuck out there on a limb. But is business involved in trying to attract?
It should be a little bit, absolutely. Yeah,
No, 100%. I mean, sponsorship is a big part of making all these things happen. But they're saying it's about a $5 million worth of operating expense in the first 3 years. And I think they were saying that their projection is that about half of that is going to come from the legacy fund, and the other half is going to come from rentals. And the question is, how are they going to manage those rentals? Are we going to get $2.5 million worth of rentals out of there in 3 years? I don't know. I mean,
or is the cost going to be so high for the community groups that they aren't going to be able to afford to go there?
Certainly, that's a concern as well.
Right. And the other issue that always worries me, you have to have good management. I've seen profitable companies fall apart with bad management. They could be the most profitable company on the planet. If you have bad management, you could lose it all. So I'm going back to what you were saying, Jamie, is you have to have those people in there that are looking after the money, because 70 million can get eaten up pretty quick.
Very quickly.
It sounds like a lot of money, but when you have a facility like that, and we're not talking just a facility that we decided to be a velodrome. This has very specific specifications. They are Olympic grade specifications. These are very particular facilities. Even the wooden floors, that wood has to be imported. There is very particular issues with that that location, and money can go right out the door. So we have to have those people in place, and you have to pay good money for those people. You can't just have anybody running those type of facilities.
Right. It's not a volunteer committee that's going to do that.
No.
So who is going to operate it? It's going to be the town of Milton, and do they have that kind of expertise on staff?
My understanding is they are creating a board that is supposed to look after the operations, and it's nothing to do with the actual town of Milton. It is going to be a separate entity, and that is my understanding of it.
Well,
yeah.
If that's the case, then we just have to sort of look at this with some blind faith and go, guys, hopefully we'll have a say on who goes onto that committee for sure, but let's make sure it's run properly. And if it is, I think it's going to be a real boon for the town, because it could cement the education village, certainly. It would be a world-class facility. It would certainly put Milton on the map. It'll get Cycling Canada back from Los Angeles
Well, that's
back to Milton, back to Canada, which is a huge thing. And it'll help to put us on the map. But geez, it's got to be done right, or else we're going to be paying for this.
Yeah, see, you're still on that fence.
Well,
until you see some proof, you're still on the fence. We've got another tweet from our viewers. Just a reminder, it's #TheIssue, and we won't show your handle. Should the velodrome be designed to provide programs and services for all residents, not just younger demographic, as stated by Mr. Duvall?
Yes, I think it should. I think absolutely should, but I think it will. They're going to have other facilities that are in there, like cardiovascular. They're going to have other things that are going on in these smaller rooms throughout the entire velodrome that are geared towards fitness, and I would love that. I'm not getting any younger myself. You know, I got a while to go. But you know, my wife's parents, they're both they stay at Birkdale. They're well into their 80s and enjoying life there. But you know, they have facilities that are in that location. Fitness at all levels is something that I know I'm more concerned about as I get on. And my father, he's doing better now than he ever did. He's actually getting out and walking all the time. These facilities are going to have other walking tracks, kind of like what's going on over at the sports center. There's an indoor walking track. A lot of people don't know that. They don't take advantage of those things. Milton is kind of unique. I think we have a lot of things in this area that allow us to do, you know, fitness throughout the year, and not just indoor, because we are, you know, in Canada we have 6 months of cold and 6 months of hot or extreme hot. There seems to be no happy medium, and I think this is going to give us just another venue to you know, kind of move on with our children and for ourselves.
Okay, so we have 2 on the fence and 1 that is leaning very strongly towards the Velodrome. Gentlemen, I've appreciated this discussion. Now I'd like to move on. Yeah, I see the surprise on everybody's face. In the last few minutes of the show, let's talk about Rob Ford. Okay, we haven't heard very much from him in the last couple days. How do you think it's affecting everybody's perception of Toronto?
Well, that's an interesting question. You kind of caught me a little bit off guard here.
That's what I wanted to do.
Well, in some respects, like, what a buffoon, okay? Like, this guy is a total train wreck, and what he needs to do is go into rehab, go away. You know, had he stepped back at the very beginning and said, yep, I smoke crack, I'm sorry, I'm an idiot, I'm going to rehab and I'll be back, you know what, this whole thing would have been over and done with, no matter what they found out. But I you know, they're hinting that there's still more to come, that there's still more dirt, and he stands up there and says, that's it, there's no more that you can find out about me. I don't think that's
You've got nothing more to hide.
No, I think there's going to be more to come, but Toronto, everywhere you turn, and all the media, it's Toronto. Half of these people didn't even have a clue that Toronto was the capital of Ontario.
So any publicity is good publicity?
To a certain extent it is.
Yeah.
To a certain extent it is. I mean, and you get a lot of people who, they fight for the underdog, right? And he is certainly the underdog right now. And you know what? He has done, fiscally, he's done well for the city. Maybe not as well as he touts that he has done. Certainly there's a lot of people who will contradict a lot of the things that he says, but I think he's done well fiscally for the city. And to a lot of people, you know what you do in your own time is okay. That said, the worst thing that I think he ever did was go to that school and start handing out magnets. Because what is he doing? He's going to say, yeah, go smoke crack, you can be the mayor. That's an awful thing to say. And certainly,
okay, Brian, in 30 seconds, about Rob Ford.
Terrible for business. Conventions that want to come into town, you know, just their first thought of it is, Rob Ford, mayor? No, I think we'll go to a different city. You know, so that part of it is not very good. Did it bring us Toronto in the map? Absolutely. Is it the kind of, you know, what we really wanted for that type? I don't think so.
Okay, no. That's great. Rob, you've got exactly 10 seconds.
Okay, so Rob Ford should definitely have stepped down. I think it would have been the right thing to do. I think if he had done that, this would have gone away immediately. And I think people would have respected that.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Sorry to catch you guys off guard with that question. We want to thank you guys for being here tonight. Good discussion on the Velodrome. We want to thank our viewers for tuning in to #TheIssue. I'm Mark Carr, and we also want to thank our volunteers, James and Curtis on camera, Darren and Allison in the control room, and my hardworking producer, Chris Cox. So on behalf of TV Cogeco, thanks for watching. See you next week. Live, #TheIssue. I'm Mark Carr. Bye for now.